For more on the state of the fashion industry, I'm joined now by Joshua T. Williams. He's president of Fashion Consort and has extensive knowledge of retail and fashion branding. Thanks so much for joining us here on the program, Joshua. Now, how would you describe the mood at fashion events so far this season, especially following the pandemic?
I think everyone is just feeling very hopeful. I think that really is the word of the day, that we really want to hope that that the best is really to come. Clearly, there's still some issues that we're dealing with, and there's still some of the pandemic that are still affecting people. But there really is a sense in fashion that we want to sort of move forward and do it perhaps in a different way.
And demand is back in the industry. What are the countries where this demand for fashion and retail is having the most impact? And why would you say those are the countries that are particularly, making the most when it comes to fashion?
Yeah, it's an interesting question in large part because every country is sort of dealing with different issues. I know for a fact in the U.S. there's a large demand for buying fashion, and in many cases because people are going back to work, they're going out back into society and attending events and really needing new clothes to go back out and see people. There's other countries, though, that are still a bit in lockdown and sort of struggling with that situation, and in that case, it's a little bit more difficult. But I think, again, there's this hopeful air that everything will turn out for the best.
One of the things I often notice with fashion weeks is I look at this spectacular fashion, but I can never see myself actually wearing it. What are some of the reoccurring trends on the runway this year, and how much of these styles actually trickle down to the everyday consumer?
Sure. I mean, the runways are really an opportunity to show the most provocative styles and things that, from an artistic point of view. And so obviously not all of that is going to end up in people's closets. But things that we're seeing that I think are very long skirts. I think there's still a desire for something that's comfortable, that might sort of cover the full body. On the other hand, we're also seeing a lot of things like fringe on details on shirts and dresses, sort of adding a little bit of flair. So I think there's also sort of this opposite contrast desire to dress up a little bit and to have something that's a little bit unique and different.
On that note, talk to us a little bit about how the pandemic has shifted what actually people wear. Are people still spending so much on those sort of high-end luxury items, or are sweats the new Dior?
Well, it sort of depends on the consumer, but I think it's again a story of contrast. I think there is a desire to have nice things again, things that we can go out in public and go to events and feel very comfortable, but also sexy in. But on the flip side, I think there is this sense of comfortableness and wanting to be comfortable, something that we became very accustomed to during COVID-19. And again, I think we see that on the runway. We're not necessarily seeing styles that feel overly uncomfortable or overt. We're really seeing more details on clothes that are comfortable. So again, I think this is sort of a story of contrast.
And fast fashion is a relatively new phenomenon in the industry that causes extensive damage to the planet, exploits workers, harms animals. Tell us more about fast fashion and how it's impacting the industry and how people are perhaps limited more in their choices by choosing fast fashion, especially perhaps for those who are more plus size, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole point of fashion in many ways, unfortunately, is to sell more things. Fashion is really built on the concept of obsolescence, which is the idea that things are in style for, let's say, 3 to 6 months, but then they're completely out of style and you have to buy something new. And of course, fast fashion has really found a way to take that to the extreme. I do think, however, people are becoming more and more aware of sort of how fast fashion is affecting those in the supply chain. So those are the people that are making the garments, but also the environment around them. As we come out of COVID-19, I think there's just more of an awareness of who we are sort of inside this planet and in the environment that we live in. And certainly we're also dealing with some climate change issues this year that are particularly poignant for people as they're starting to make decisions about how they're going to spend their money.
How do you think the industry is affecting retailers? Are shops still having to make sort of fairly drastic cuts in order to cope with a business that's still probably relatively struggling in comparison to where it was at prior to the pandemic?
Sure. I mean, there was a lot of pent-up demand, and I think we saw a lot of people rush back to stores and purchase, but then now we're seeing a lot of inflation. And I think that is certainly put a damper on in terms of fashion and what people are willing to spend. We're certainly seeing numbers out there that suggest that people are a lot more cautious about buying fashion or things that they see as more frivolous. And that's something that fashion executives are certainly aware of and in keeping in mind. At the same time, again, as we go back to where we started, is there is a sense of hope still, even amongst all of the things that are happening in the world, whether it's COVID or some of the political unrest. And I think there's still a hope that fashion in many ways can kind of be an opportunity for people to buy things and feel a little bit more comfortable and sort of express themselves as they get out more into the world post-COVID.
All right, Joshua, I really appreciate your time. Joshua T. Williams, President of Fashion Consort.